What's up, everybody? Welcome back to our Phases of Kratom Addiction Recovery series. So today we're going to be talking about quitting, what my experience was with it, what the different ways that you can go about it are, and what all that looks like. So to start off with, my experience quitting Kratom was not an easy one. I was at 40 to 60 grams per day at my highest, and I did a long taper over the course of a year. And I tapered down to 4 grams total per day when I made my final jump. At that point, I quit, and I went through about 2 weeks of acute withdrawals. And then I went through about a year and a half of post-acute withdrawal symptoms. So that's my experience just in a nutshell. And we're going to talk about it more as we explain this video and talk about the different ways that you can go about quitting yourself. But so that was what I did. I did a long taper. And in the quitting process, there are 2 ways that you can go about it. You can either do a taper like I did, or you can quit cold turkey. So let's start off with tapering. I did a long taper, like I said, over the course of a year. At that large amount that I was at, where I was at 40 to 60 grams per day, I did in my first initial cut, which means when I first cut back on the amount that I was taking, I did a pretty big cut. So I cut down to 28 grams per day at first. And why I did this was because I knew that I had to get like some structure to when I was dosing and how much I was dosing, because that would give me more of a way to, as I was cutting down through my taper, be able to cut back in more of a defined way. So by cutting down to that 28 grams in 4 7-gram doses per day, that gave me like a good framework to start with as I went into this year-long taper. So then from there, I cut back about 1 gram per month. And depending on how I was feeling and how much my body was struggling to regulate to the new amount, that's how long I would stay at that amount that I was then at. When I did that first initial cut, when I went down to 28 grams, I stayed there for probably about 2 months. And this is in part why my taper ended up lasting so long. And when I got down to around probably 3 grams per day, I ended up finding this kind of sweet spot, I guess is a good way of describing it, where because I had cut back so much, and after my body went through that first initial, week or 2 of regulating, I found that 3 gram dose was really good for me to be able to continue working on the things that I was doing in this tapering process to get ready for my final quit. And I wasn't having a lot of negative side effects from taking the larger amounts of Kratom. Some of the things that I was working on, just to explain that as well, is that I had to gain weight when I was in my taper, because I lost a lot of weight during the worst part of my addiction. And I needed to have this time to be able to get the weight on my body, and so that I was able to navigate the final quit that I was going to then go through. I also used this time to establish regular meal times during the day, because I had just focused all my time on basically, when I was going to take my Kratom doses and stuff. So I needed to get used to eating 3 times a day. I also started supplementing a lot during this time with magnesium, vitamin C, vitamin D, and the diet that I was eating was really rich in natural heme iron, which is the type of iron that is from basically red meat. So I was really fortifying and building my body up during this time of doing my taper. So that's what I was working on when I was in the, the process of going through this taper. The other option to this, I just explained what my situation was with my taper. But the other alternative and option that you can do is cold turkey. So tapering is not for the faint of heart. It is not easy. It takes a lot of discipline. And I found that, especially when I would make the cuts, meaning I would cut back on how much kratom I was taking, that I would go through about a week or two of an adjustment process, which means withdrawals, which means not being able to sleep, which means anxiety, depression, sensitivity to cold and to light and to all other tactile stuff. And so it's not easy, you guys, to taper. And I've shared this with you guys when we do our one-on-ones, and I think I've said it in some other videos, that I believe that one of the successful mind states that we can get into if you're going to take the tapering route, and this is what I went through, is that I was very determined and I was very disciplined to stay at the amount that I was at, or to cut back when I was actually, moving forward in my taper and doing my cuts. And why that's so important is because if we go back and we take more, that's just going to prolong the whole process of the taper. And that's where discipline and dedication really come into the tapering process. And I've said this before with you guys that the staying at the same amount and staying the same, there's nothing wrong with doing that and staying there for as long as you need to stay. If you do a big cut like me, or even if the smaller cuts are affecting you a lot and you want to stay there for a month or 2 months, then that's okay. But taking more is going to, have you lose the progress that you've made. So what I highly recommend is just cutting back and staying on that amount rather than, when you get uncomfortable, taking more. So that's a big piece of advice that I want to share about tapering. So moving to the other side of it, which is cold turkeying, some people who don't have the discipline and the willpower, or it's not even about that, or they're just, rationally thinking I don't want to prolong this any longer than it has to be prolonged, and they decide to cold turkey. That's the alternative to this. I personally don't have experience with that, but I've known a lot of people who have, and I've seen it done successfully. Some of the benefits to cold turkey are, like we just said, you get it over with quicker. A lot of times, because as you taper, your body is regulating to these smaller amounts. And then when you get to a lower amount and then you do your final jump, some people can find that the withdrawals may be slightly more bearable, but some not. For me, I don't have it to compare to cold turkey, but I'll tell you, even going down to that smaller amount, the withdrawals were still pretty intense at the end. But with cold turkey, some people do report, who have tapered before, that when you jump from a large amount, that the withdrawals can be more intense. So that's one of the things that can be tough. But one of the good things is that it's over with quicker. You don't have to prolong it and stretch it out by doing a taper. So by cold turkeying and just quitting, you're able to go through the withdrawals and really get to the other side of it a lot quicker than what you would be with tapering. I personally knew somebody who cold turkeyed at 100 grams per day, you guys. I was at 40 to 60, and that was a lot. But I knew someone personally who was at 100 grams per day, and they cold turkeyed from it. And I was there with them throughout the whole process, and they are one of the biggest soldiers and warriors that I know in Kratom Recovery, and I just am so honored to know them. But they successfully cold turkeyed. So it is possible, and both ways are completely possible for that matter, but it's all about what's going to work better for you. For a lot of us, we have jobs, we have responsibilities, we have families, we have different things where we're not able to, go into the throes of hardcore cold turkey withdrawals. So for us, tapering down is what is the better choice. But for some of us, we want to get it over with quicker, and a lot of times cold turkey is the way to go. So at that point, after you have gone through the process, whether tapering or cold turkeying, what's it like to actually quit? What's that all about? So for me, like I said, made my final jump at 4 1-gram doses per day. I forgot to mention as well that I would take my doses 4 hours apart. So I was taking them on a schedule. I wanted to mention that before we move forward. So I was at 4 grams per day. And when I made that final jump, you guys, as I know a lot of us go through it, it's very scary. A lot of us don't know what to expect. A lot of us that have been doing our taper can, go through parts of the withdrawal process when we're going through our taper, and it can really, be kind of scary, a lot of scary actually, as we go into our final quit. But when we go into it, this is really like what is going to lead us to the other side. And so I just want to let you know that like, no matter how tough it is, no matter how scary it is, it's part of the process to be able to get through it. So what did it look like for me? I made my final jump. Sorry, I'm a little stuffy. I'm getting over a cold. I made my final jump, and I immediately started to feel flu-like symptoms as my last dose wore off. I was achy, my joints were achy. I was extremely sensitive to colds, and at the same time I was sweating. I had crippling anxiety that bordered on panic attacks. I was not able to sleep. I wasn't able to eat. Basically what I did was I stayed wrapped up in a blanket, and I would get into a hot shower or a hot bath and, stay in there for as long as I needed to. I used a ton of Epsom salt in my bath water. I megadosed vitamin C and magnesium. And I have since quit cannabis, but I did use it during my quit. And so I was utilizing that. And it was basically like riding out a storm is the best way that I can describe it. And it had a peak to it where like I took my final dose, and it the worst of that peak lasted for probably a few days. And I know that can sound overwhelming, but I'm just being honest. And I didn't sleep for basically the first couple weeks. And the peak though of the physical discomfort was around like the few day mark. And once I hit about a week, I started to see like it let up. And then in the second week, things were kind of like coming down after that peak of that discomfort. And you guys, it's a battle. I'm going to be straight up with you. It's a battle. And I knew that I was never going to take Kratom again. And I knew that there was no going back. So I knew I had to ride it out. And that was a really big part of where my faith came in. And so that was like integral to the process, because I was not able to get through it on my own. And so that's why faith was so important. But so that's like describing like what the actual withdrawals were like and how long they lasted. I know for everybody it's going to be different. I always like to give a disclaimer that like no matter what my experience was, that doesn't mean that it's going to be your experience. Some people go through it completely different. Some people don't feel bad at all. So don't let what I was experiencing, make you think that that's exactly what's going to go on. But I just wanted to share that. Some of the things that helped, I just mentioned that with the supplements that I was taking and how I was using like hot showers and stuff. But another one of the things that was really important was, even though I felt like absolute garbage, I would go out and I would take walks once a day. And so that was important. For me, I quit right when the pandemic started. I quit in February of 2020 and the pandemic went down in March. So there weren't any people out. So, it kind of worked in my benefit. So, and that was like during the whole like mask, stuff that was going on where you had to be masked everywhere. So I could just mask up and take a walk and feel a lot more like, like anonymous, because as I was going through this really horrible withdrawal process, like in going out and taking a walk, that gave me a little bit more of a chance to do it. And I understand we're in different times now, but like exercising is so important. If you don't want to leave the house, you can still do like basic stuff at home that kind of gets your heart going. This is going to release natural endorphins that are going to help with this process. Getting sunlight is really important too, even if it's in the winter. I'm in the Midwest, so I, don't have a lot of sun a lot of times, but like, just even going out and walking in the sun or sitting by a sunny window is so important. And then one of the things that I have to stress is that like, this is the time when we learn patience, and it becomes crucial to this process because we don't know how long this is going to take. And this is where we really will cultivate true patience in ourselves. And, this is one of the hardest things that we'll ever go through. And it also is something that makes us stronger. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. So that's basically what quitting was like for me and how it looked like in my experience. And we talked about, the whole cold turkey thing. The withdrawals will take on a similar form with mine as when you cold turkey. It may be exaggerated a little bit more, if you cold turkey, depending on the amount that you're at. So that's basically it, guys. If you have any questions about it, or if you'd like to share your experience about how withdrawals were for you and the actual quitting process was for you, that would be really cool if you want to drop it in the comments. We have an awesome community that is growing, and I am so stoked to be a part of it here on this channel. So if you're going through this right now, even if it seems like you're alone and you're going through it, you're a part of this community with us here. So I encourage you to reach out to us in the comments section, and I will see you next week as we continue our series here. And we're going to get into the pink cloud next week. All right. Love you guys. Bye.